G'day and welcome to David Joshua Ford Live, episode 60. What a great number. And today we're going to take a look at the 4K rack build that I have just here. It's been something that's been occupying my time for the last month, so I really wanted to show you guys. It's a 4ME Constellation rack. Also on today's show, if you have any questions as we go along about explaining the rack, do drop them in the comments, or if you're watching afterwards, drop that as a comment afterwards as well. It's great to be back in the chair after, I feel like it's been maybe 2 months that I've been away. I had a trip to Italy. If you've been following me on Instagram there, you would have seen a couple of pictures. That was really fun to travel with my wife and my 6-month-old, which brings its certain challenges when you're trying to get to sleep and they are jet lagged. Plus, there's about 2 weeks where it was about 95 degrees in Italy, so it was kind of, we just couldn't see as much as we would like with I'm gonna say a toddler, but she's crawling now, but she was 6 months. So that was a lot of fun and she was a good spirit through all of the travels. So that was August, and then this month in September has been very busy looking after my daughter as well as running a business. And one of the projects that has been occupying most of my time has been building out an automated live stream studio for a fashion designer here in New York. So we're going to take a look through at that, and we'll take a look here at the rack. This is going to be the brains of it. It's about 4 feet by 2 feet by 3 feet deep. It's a standard computer rack, and we've got a lot of video switching gear in there. And I really like this case here. This is a StarTech one, and what I like about it is it's got a full enclosure, but you can take all the doors off, the front and back and the sides, so it's accessible to get in and get into the patching. But also the venting on it means that there's a lot of airflow through it, so it's not going to overheat. And then from a security point of view, not that there's particularly anyone nefarious who would be trying to get into it at the location, but it's just good to keep it away from cleaners or just someone who's looking for an iPad or like an iPhone charging point. You know, you want to make sure that people aren't coming to the back of the panel and being like, oh, look, there's an open socket, let's plug it in. So that just kind of keeps everything contained. The cables go up through the bottom back section of that, and so there's nothing that people can unplug, so it's kind of like a self-contained unit. So this really sort of, neat design. I like that, and then easy to open up and access all of the things on the front. And that is what we'll go through in detail a bit. But just to set the context, the front of house that I've been setting up has 6 Canon PTZ cameras. I'll just pull up a photograph here on my other one. Here we go. All right, so this is part of the fashion designers. I've got to come back to jumping around here. There's 6 of these cameras, and they are installed on, just zooming right in here, moving around with my Mac mouse here. So we've got conduit that is running up around the venue to get the cabling back to this switcher that is going to be, or the rack that's going to be installed. And then there's this piping, this black pipe here, which looks great. And each of these cameras has a pipe with a clamp, so the elevation can be adjusted in terms of setting it for eye line. So this lens is around about a seated height for someone who's on stage or doing a podcast, that kind of stuff. But it's also adjustable, so if we needed to have it at standing height, we could do that. Or if we just wanted it right out of the way, then we could do that as well. So at the top here, you'll see there's a shielded Ethernet and a 12G SDI cable that are coming out of the conduit. There's a little bit of excess cabling there just in case we need to lower the cameras. That's where that cabling would be used. And then there's a clamp up the top, which is basically an anchor point for the safety wire here going down to the camera for people's safety in the studio, as well as for the cameras, because each of these are running around about $10,000. So it's quite an expensive camera, and not that it would fall off once it's mounted, but it's more when you're handling the camera. Sometimes if you're trying to get the plate in or something, you just want to make sure you're not going to drop that camera and break something. So that's the cabling, and then we come down to the camera itself, which is mounted upside down, but you can actually like flip these little plates around. You can just pull them out so that the branding is upright. And I did that partly for gravity, because like when it's mounted from the top, it's like the weight of that is it's not going to tip if it's on a ball head. So you can kind of just let it hang while you're adjusting that. I'll jump through to the next picture here, which is weirdly. Okay, so there's a super clamp here, and then on the super clamp is a Manfrotto hex pin tripod head. That's that silver thing here. This is really great because the hex pin means that it's not going to slip, and then the tripod plate has 3 screws in it that will will anchor the tripod head. So this is a Manfrotto Arca Swiss type plate here, but not their original plate. I went and I had to search through, I think I went through about 10 different plates to try and find one, because these N700s have 2 anchor points. So there's a screw here and a screw about here. And I wanted a longer plate so that I could offset that and sort of poke the camera out into the room a bit, so that it could have in some instances, about 270-degree view around the columns. So we could get the front stage area and then sort of swing around and get audience, or if there's a fashion installation or something like that, then we would do that. And then this also has some leveling bubbles in here, which makes it very handy. PTZ cameras have to be level. As much as you think you could sort of mount it on its side and do like vertical video for Instagram, they have to be vertical. They have to be horizontally level, because if you try to pan, it would just like throw the horizon. So PTZ cameras are mounted deadpan flat. Then in the back here, we have a 12G SDI cable coming out here, and a shielded Cat6 cable, I think that one is. And I've also put just a little bit of tape over this serial port here, because if someone plugs this cable into here, it can blow the camera. I feel like this should have been designed better in this instance. I have heard of some people who have done this and the camera won't turn on. So just to be safe, I've sort of taped over that just so no one else would plug that in. But the camera is getting its power, which is PoE++, from a Ubiquiti switch back in this rack here. And then the video is coming out of, the power and controller over Ethernet. So we're controlling the camera over the same cable. And then the 12G cable is is what is sending the video. So let's jump to the next photo. And then on the back end, I'll go into this a little bit later, but when we go behind the scenes, basically running all of this equipment on Companion, so they will be able to have someone come in and manually run a show, and they can like choose different show types, and it'll bounce out to like a show page. And it really was meant to be like a one-touch solution where they could say, I want to do a workout class, and the cameras will configure for that. Or, I want to do live shopping, and the camera will swing around and set up for live shopping. Also, like a podcast scenario where you've got multiple guests and multiple cameras cutting. And the cameras are going backwards and forwards on loops that can be automated. And some other exciting stuff that's coming up in the Companion Canon PTZ software that I've been working on with Joseph, which is really cool. Very excited to show that in a couple of weeks. But basically, the iPad 2 means that for someone who's on staff or someone who wants to run a live stream, for this fashion designer can basically come in, select their show type, and hit start, and that will turn on the cameras. It'll put the cameras in the right spot. It'll begin their motion backwards and forwards. It'll start streaming. It'll run a backup recording, and it will also open or close the microphones that are meant to be for that. In terms of podcasts, you might want 2 microphones. If you're doing a round table, 8 microphones is what this system can handle. So that is a look at the front of house end, and this rack is going to be taken in there this week to be installed and run those cameras. So moving along, just very quickly, g'day to Jeremy, great to have you here, and is excited to watch, and to Jim coming from Las Vegas, and great to have you guys on here. If you have any questions as we go along, let me know. All right, so next up, let's take a look at, what was my next thing? I showed you that. Okay, so we're gonna open up the rack, and I will show you how that works. I'm just gonna unplug my audio so that I can move around a bit easier. So the front of it, I've already opened here. This just has a lock that you don't need to lock it, but if you want it locked, you can actually do that with a key. So that would open like that, so we have access from the front. And then you can actually take the whole side panel off. And it's funny, you can feel the heat coming out here. The 4ME is here, that's probably the hottest device in this, and the fan is here, and it's just basically pushing it out the side. So that's nice that it's not even going up inside. This basically comes off like that, and that I will put up the back. Hopefully that is good. And then the same with the back door, you can just swing that one open, and I'll just move that aside. Let me see, just want to make sure this is not going to get on the cables here. All right. And so that's how you can get into that. It's a 4-post, so these are all bolted onto 2 posts, front and back. Most of the equipment is on the front because I guess when I was thinking about how to put this together, I've got to think about someone who is vision switching and running audio, who'll be seated next to this, probably a couple of feet, and just want to have eye line to the hyperdecks and to the vision switching and the audio, just to be able to access, particularly for the audio, power on and off if they need to, but also just visual of the screens and what's happening, and so easy access for that, rather than putting stuff on the back. On the back end, I've got a bit of power and computing, things that people, like an operator, wouldn't really go into. It's probably something that I'm going to sort of more keep an eye on back there. I'm just going to get my iPhone up so that I can pull up my view into the back, and we can take a look into the back of the rack. Give me 1 second, pull this one up, and all right, cool. All right, we are, oh, let me come back to that one. All right, so this is my view when I'm live streaming for you. I'm just running this on a NDI feed app from the camera, just so we can get in a little bit closer and look behind the scenes. So around the back here, actually, no, I was going to give you a view of the front of it. So excuse me for a second while I bring up the rack. Where are we? Okay, there we go. Looking down the front of this rack, we've got at the top, here we go. This was what I was going to do next. So there's a tray up here. This is where an ATEM Extreme ISO is going to go. That's going to be the backup switcher. So if there is ever a problem with the 4ME switcher, then there's a backup HD version, that can stream, that can record, that can do the vision switching, all that kind of stuff. That's what's running the studio at the moment while the rest of this rack is being built. Next up is all of the hyperdecks. So we've got 6 ISO recordings down here, and then we've got a playback machine, and we've got a program record because we have 6 cameras. So that's why we've got 6 ISOs, a program record, and a playback. But they will be set up so that if we needed to, we could record onto 8 hyperdecks, or we could playback separately. So because there is that sort of functionality there. Down here is actually Web Center 4K, so that's what's doing the main streaming. That's going to be the sort of the primary 4K streaming device, and then there's also the ATEM Extreme at the top that is going to be the backup one. This is the 4ME Constellation 4K, brand new. This has been in back order for a couple of months, and they're just new in stock in B&H, so finally the order came through in time to get it into place. This is, as I said, it's probably the hottest device, and so there's, probably that's where all the heat comes from in terms of this rack. Most of the other things aren't as sort of power hungry. Maybe the switch is, the Ubiquiti switch. And then the next thing that we have in here is the Behringer X32 rack. I chose to put in this rack because it has the most compatibility with Companion, and one of the primary things was that this would be all automated, and so I needed to find a mixer that would fit in here, that would fit into the workflow, that could just be automated, so we didn't have to worry too much about the console. Although I will say we also have, and I can probably come to this a little bit later, the X Touch is part of that. So this is a network controlled surface. So I can, on the, let me see if I can find a channel just to do the, is that it? Yeah, you can do the fun up and down automated type things with there. So this is really just a control surface. So if someone was to come in and do a manual show, then they've got all that control there. But otherwise, the most of the automation is actually being done by Companion, and that's why I've sort of designed this in two parts. So this rack can be kind of sealed off, and it's there, and it's always running, and someone can pull up a show and sort of automate something via Companion. And then the what do you call it? The console room, like with the multi-view TVs and the computer screen and all that kind of stuff, and the mixer, all of that can be switched on if we want to do a manual show. So the whole console could be switched off, and we could still run a whole show just via the rack. So that's kind of why I did it like that. And then what was that last bit I was going to show you was, I think it was under here, down here is so some of this is missing because this is actually on location, and this was, has been running. So the audio 1 and 2 is actually on location, and one of the antennas. That'll be slotted in this week once this rack gets delivered. And then down here will be the audio antenna. So that's actually antennas that are going to the front of house because there's a lot of interference in between this rack and where they will be. But we've got 8 inputs, and these are something where there's 2 microphones. So we've got, I'm just going to pull this up again, this one. So each of those receivers has a handheld microphone if they want to go that route. That's good for a nice sort of close voice, or otherwise the lapel microphone, which I'm running my own one here, is a Sennheiser G4, and so that's the lapel if someone wants to have a podcast. And it's really nice to have those 2 options, partly so if one goes down, you've got a backup. They can't be on at the same time because they run on the same channel. If you had both of them on, you'd get a lot of whoop, 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 that kind of stuff. So it's choosing a lapel or a handheld depending on the show. One of the advantages of the handhelds is, if you are doing a podcast and you're up here sitting in the room there and there's background noise, this sounds very nice and close and present, and it will cut out a lot of the other background noise. Downside is if you have a guest who's not across that, they'll just be, maybe they'll be down here somewhere, and so that's where you need someone to kind of adjust the levels there. So the lapel microphone is good because you can put it on someone and they don't have to think about it at all. They can just focus on having a conversation, but it does pick up a bit more room ambience and something you got to sort of think about as well. So that is that, and then where am I? I'm going to go back to my very last one, which was down here. Just a bit of blank space. I was possibly going to, we're again losing focus there. At the moment, I've just that'll be sealed off, and there'll be the cables and the stuff that we need to put in there, just to keep it neat and tidy, and also just for security to sort of make sure that people aren't unplugging things or getting into it in a way that they shouldn't. Excellent. So, question here from Jeremy saying, do you have the capacity for the client to use the roaming or manned cameras via a patch pane, or is it set up purely for PTZs? Is there room for flexibility? I've certainly got the inputs. There's 40 inputs in this thing, so we can take a ton of more camera inputs. At the moment, because they want it automated and repeatable, it's something where, for example, we've set up a podcast scenario. So you've got two people chatting, you've got three cameras, a wide and sort of a cross shooting, and those cameras are set, and so people come in, and as long as they're seated in their chair in that position, then the whole thing works. If someone moves around the room, that's another story. But this is something where, let me just hit record here on the ATEM. Maybe it's not recording. I think it's up. So in terms of a patch panel, no, because we don't want to run cables around the room. It's a showroom for the fashion designer. She's got a big LED wall, and she has all of her collections on display there, so she doesn't want cameras and cables in there. So the PTZ cameras are meant to be a bit more sort of fly on the wall, sort of out of the way. But the other route that I'm going to go is so that there is a bit more flexibility for some of the podcasts is probably using something like a phone. I don't know if you saw the Blackmagic's new app, and I was actually watching Aaron's podcast today, and you can get a clean feed out of the Blackmagic app, and if you screen share that to something like an Apple TV, which will be in the rack, then someone can use their phone as another camera source. So that is something that's going to be in there, and then because these wireless mics can pretty much go anywhere that they need to, we're sort of covered from audio, and then the cameras can kind of either be on the PTZs or something like that. But that's a good question, because it certainly needs changing. Over time, shows will change and adapt, and it's probably something where more conduit will be run, and it'll be like a new camera position. For example, if you want to sort of show the photography section or the cutting room floor or something like that. So, all right. So that's the front of the rack. Now I'm going to go inside the rack so you can get a bit more of a view. I was trying to do this in order. We are going to come to here. Okay, we are back onto this one. All right, so I'm going to stand up. I am free to move around. This is the rack. Making sure I'm on the right screen here. If we come around the back, move my chair out of the way. We're on the top. We've got some fans, so this is exhausting the. It's got just a bit of airflow coming out, although there is plenty of other airflow coming through. We'll start at the bottom. The cables will come up through this vent here. I'm actually going to just keep this one closed just for security and that kind of stuff. And so all the cables, SDI cables, all that kind of stuff is going to come up through here. What we don't have at the moment is the Ubiquiti stuff, which will sit in here for the router and the switch. That's currently at location, so that has to be added in. But there's a PoE++ switch, which will run the cameras here, and there's a router. And what else do we have? I think that's the main thing that's missing. This Ubiquiti power distribution is in there so that we can sort of keep tabs on power consumption, and we can sort of power cycle devices if we needed to. If we needed to remotely power cycle the 4ME or whatever, then in Ubiquiti we can do that. So that just enables a bit more flexibility remotely. So we've got the power conditioner is sitting here. And then under it, I've actually got a UPS. I was initially going to put a 1,000 watt UPS in, but they were crazy heavy. And so I went with this one instead, which is a lithium ion one, which is sort of, the battery's in here and it pops out. I think it's only like a 50 watt hour. But I was thinking through the power consumption aspect of it. Let's go back to this shot so you can see me as I move around. So from the power consumption side of it, and because this is all automated, if the power goes down and a computer reboots, I need to make sure that everything is going to happen when it's meant to happen. And so the UPS will tell me if it goes down. It will send a message via the monitoring that it has. UPS? Yeah, UPS. I keep getting that mixed up with the Postal Service. And so that will notify me if the power goes down, and then I can sort of take a look at that. But it's also, there's probably, I'm guessing, 1,200 watts sort of happening back here of power consumption, whereas the UPS is 400 watts. And so you've got to think about what are you going to save. Basically, the decks will go down and the ATEM will go down, audio will go down. What it's going to save is the router, so that there's always sort of a network connection there, and it's going to save the computer because that's what's running Companion. Power goes down, and when the power comes back on, these devices will power on and boot up again. But I just want to keep that Mac computer running, which is the Companion server, so that all of the automations stay in place, so that people aren't trying to press buttons and nothing happens. So that's kind of the way up I did between putting like a massive UPS in there, which is just extremely heavy. It's probably like the weight of this rack already. It's like a giant lead acid battery, and then just the functionality of that. So that'll give me, I don't know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of, if it goes down, the devices can run for that long. It also beeps, so we know that power has gone out if you're on location, and it'll send a remote message so that I could see like, okay, the power's gone down, and if they're not in a live stream, then I still need to like look at it and just make sure that everything's going to be working. So that's the power. Let's go back to, I've got to get up here, do a little dance, move around, and go back to my camera here. All right, so that's the power. It's really nice being able to get in here. I like this, being able to get into the side, taking that off. It's been easy to patch it up. At the top, I have 2 trays. There's going to be Mac sitting up here, which is running it. There's another Mac on location there. This tray, I'm going to put some bidirectional converters in there. I was going to put them, at the moment, there's some down here in this space, which is the web. So the web presenter is over here in this Terranex Mini tray, and that has an Apple TV sitting in there, and it was just a bit clunky to get back here, so I'm actually just going to put it up here so it's much easier to access and to change around if I need it. So the power comes into the Furman, gets conditioned, and then it goes into the distribution, and most of the equipment's running on that, and then the power also goes into the UPS for, as I said, the router and the computer, just to keep that going. And all right, so then around this side, basically I put this one here because I wanted to sort of save space from the front, because there's, that's getting pretty compact, and I still wanted to have like gaps in here for airflow and stuff between devices. The cables will come in here, so there's going to be more cables that are going to be the end of those camera points. That's going to need somewhere to just sort of come inside the rack and be out of the way. This is one of the audio receivers, which eventually will be mounted up here. So this will be up here, and there'll be space at the bottom for the cables. Again, we've got some fans for ventilation here to push air into the rack. This is just a temporary switch that I'm running while I'm setting things up, but this Netgear one will be, they'll be taken out, and then the Ubiquiti router and switch will be in the back here. So there'll be easy access to get to the power, as well as to get to the router and all the networking cables and that kind of stuff. And that just means that as I can reach through here, and I can get down to the audio, and I can get to the ATEM and to all of the hyperdecks, because there becomes a lot of spaghetti junction when all this is happening. So basically you've got the audio antennas receiving from the front of house and also powering these receivers, and then the audio is coming out of the receivers into the Behringer mixer here. Those audio outputs are going as a program into the switcher. They're also coming back out into the auxiliary, so that on the monitoring end of things, we can switch between upstream or downstream, so we can sort of listen to just a mixer, or if we want to hear what's actually going out to program, just to make sure that nothing's been muted in the switcher. And then this is the back end of the Constellation, which is a ton of SDI cables, and essentially we're going to have camera inputs here, and then we've got hyperdeck inputs here, and then we've got some monitoring here. The multi-views are coming around. The 4 multi-views are coming back into the last inputs there so that we can route it to the floor if we need to show people anything. And then what do we got? We got the outputs. So then the outputs from 1 to 6, or 1 to 8, I guess, are then going up into the hyperdecks for recording, and it's coming back in for playout if we need to play back what we've recorded. And just for the playback at the moment, I've got an A and a B if we want to do sort of an alpha channel in the back there. The white cables are all the network cables that are connected, and they're going to come down here and they're going to plug into the switch. And then I've got some cables that are just sitting here that SDI will come out of the clean feed monitor out from the hyperdecks is going to be a 3G feed that's going to go into the ATEM Extreme as a backup switcher in case anything else happens with the switcher, and then that HD version will be a backup that is able to be used. Let me just get back here onto my wide shot. Let's put this one down. And just so that we have redundancy, because if something goes down with the ATEM 4ME, not even that it's like, not that it dies, but like, for example, if there's a software update that is not compatible with the companion update, then that's something where suddenly you might not have functionality between your automations and your actual sort of main switcher. So having another device there helps, and it also means that then there's 2 encoders. There's a web presenter and there's the ATEM Extreme. So they can be sort of maybe a backup if they're the same resolution, or they could be actually used to go to another place. So that is that's the bulk of that. Richard wants to know how reliable are the hyperdecks. I've heard stories of failures and compatibility file format. Have you explored solid state device for the recording and playback instead? I mean, I've been using the Hyperdeck Studio Plus for a year or 2 now, and that's been solid. I haven't had a problem with playback as long as you sort of export it from Resolve's playback file format, and then it'll be in there. It's less flexible than something like VLC, but it also means it's more reliable to work time and time again. For example, if they have a big LED wall in this venue, and if I wanted to play videos onto that, then I could load a video into the Hyperdeck, and I could set it to play a certain number, and then that source is always going to play that. Whereas something like VLC, you might need to change your screen preferences and something like that. So that's worked well. Why don't you save the recordings? We will. I'm not quite sure what gave that impression. Basically, the 4K video can be recorded at the 4K 60, and that's the 6 cameras plus a program feed. That can be recorded in 4K, and then there's going to be a backup that can be recorded to the extreme ISO in HD. So, so there's sort of 2 copies of redundancy there if they really need it. I imagine some of the time, so they're planning on doing workouts 3 times a week that will be live streamed, and you can just sort of go and watch and join in with that for free. They're great instructors from Physique 57, and those things we will probably just record a backup of the HD program, which could be like 3 gigabytes. Whereas if we recorded everything on the in the H.264, it'd probably be more like 250 gigabytes for an hour. Whereas and also I think the Hyperdecks are probably similar. I've got to look at the file sizes for that. But because they're H.265, they're better compression amount. So that is, it will be, live streams can be, backed up in either the program in 4K and also all the ISOs in 4K, or it could just be HD program or any mixture of the two. You could do both at the same time. So that is something that just sort of gives flexibility depending on what they want. So for example, if they're doing a podcast recording with a really great guest and it's sort of a one-time thing, you know, you're never going to get that moment again, then you probably want to record that in 4K and you want to record across all the cameras. But like I was saying, for the workouts, which happen, you know, multiple times a week, and it's more of a got to be in the moment, then the HD recording is more for posterity than it is for, you know, maybe building a catalog. But I mean, that's up to them. All right, what's next? The automations. So I, as part of this, was saying I did the, hang on, I'm gonna find this, where did I go? Oh, this was the switch, if you wanna see what was going on here. So the cameras are being run by this switch. So it's a, here we go. Okay, so this is a PoE++ switch. So there's like I think it's 8 ports. Yeah, 8 ports here that are PoE++, which is about 60 watts, I think, for the camera, but in reality it's less than that. And then PoE plus on the rest of them. So there's about 400 watts in this switch that can sort of power all of the cameras, and then also just connect to the hyperdecks and that kind of thing. So that's the switch that we've been using there for the cameras. Okay, so you saw a shot of it before when we had this shot up of what it's going to look like for them to control it. There's an iPad, so that they, with Companion 3 now, you can control it wirelessly on an iPad. Doesn't have to be on the Stream Deck. Stream Deck is still great particularly from a PTZ point of view. I think if you're trying to bring up fast functionality, the buttons on these work really well. And I am excited in the near future to show you my multiple Stream Deck setting, which is going to be this one. So I'm building a profile which is going to have 4 Stream Decks that can be controlled across here and sort of move in sync, so you can select something and the pages there will update depending on what you've got, which is really good if you've got a 4ME switcher and you need 40 inputs across here and different routing. So that works really well for routing too. But also from a PTZ point of view, this was, where are we? Number 2, this one. This just works better when you're trying to like organize a sort of PTZ camera. It's more responsive than an iPad, which can sometimes, like the long presses aren't as tactile. So that's where this is still really useful if you're running a manual show. But if you were running where are we? This one. If you just want your client to be like hit a button and start a show, this works really well because it's a lot less intimidating. Everyone understands an iPad and a button, and you can go start and you go stop. And I'm probably going to simplify this back-end page even more just to stop and start. Some of these are a bit manual in terms of getting a first look of the cameras and looping them individually or together. So it's probably not necessary. But yeah, basically there's a home page that they will log into, and each of these they can turn on all the cameras here or turn the cameras all off. You can also have an automation at like 11 o'clock at night, so that if someone hasn't shut down the cameras after a show, then at 11 o'clock it will automatically shut all the cameras down just to save the sensors, so it's not like working around the clock. And they select a show, and then that bounces into this type thing of basically start and stop, which starts the streaming and the recording and the camera positions and the exposure and the looping back and forth and the cuts. So all of that is automated through Companion. I don't know why I've got a double thing there. I think that must be something in the system. Anyway, so that's a quick look at the rack that I've been building, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to have a client who trusts me just to be like, what's the best stuff that we can do? We want this to be automated and simple. And as you can see on the back end here, there's a ton of stuff and it's not particularly simple, but trying to break it down to that sort of start-stop button has been really fun to just sort of think through all the scenarios, and the audio, and also playing with the X Touch has been good. The console here, because I think it's got that good flexibility between manual control if they need it for like a bigger show, and then just being able to build those automations into Companion so that if there's only like the yoga instructor doing a workout, only one microphone opens, that kind of stuff just means that no one has to set up shows each time. It's already laid out and it's ready to go and repeat. Cool. Well, that's about all I've got for today. Very quickly, and I know my schedule's been a little bit erratic because it's a Sunday night here and I am live streaming to you as opposed to normally I would do it on Friday. So having a 6-month-old daughter, well, she's 7 months now actually, they're growing up fast, has been just challenging in terms of getting through the workload and also looking after her. And live streaming can sometimes sort of hit the back of that. But I've been working on a ton of stuff in the background. So some things that I have coming up, where is it? Okay, Forum Rack. I showed you a bit briefly there, the multiple stream decks. So this is something where if you have 2, 3, 4, however many stream decks, you can build in a workflow so that you can have more than 32 buttons on a page. And that's been very handy as I build out this Forum because there's just a lot more buttons necessary there. What else I'm working on a new profile update, so that is coming. A couple more weeks. I'm getting very close. There's a ton of stuff to put in it because Companion only has 99 pages and stuff has to be consolidated onto a page, and it gets, again, complex, but I'm trying to make it simple for people to use. And then the other thing is I've been doing a ton of work on Canon's P2Z cameras with the help of Joseph Adams, who's been an amazing programmer in the background. He's been the secret sauce behind the Canon control stuff. But we've been working on creating automated trace loops for the cameras. So that is something that I'm excited to demo for you at some point when that is ready to be shown. I've been working with the N700s and the 300. I haven't used the 500s yet. And I know they've just released another N100, which at first glance I think looks like a 300 without the SDI on it. So I think there's some really exciting cameras coming out from Canon, and being able to control it with Companion alongside, as you saw, like all of this other stuff. So you can build that into queues so your cameras can do things, and then you can also automate your audio. And we haven't even gone on to lights yet, but next up we'll do lights. Yeah. All right. Last question before we go. Total, how many recorders you build? And is the rack movable? The rack is, it's got wheels, so you could like move it forward and backwards, but in terms of moving it, that's going to be like putting it on a whole, cart, and it's more of a, couple of person job because it gets quite heavy with all of the stuff in there. So when we move it to the client's location, some of this stuff I'm going to take out, probably mainly the switcher, just to like reduce the weight and also take some of the more expensive stuff out while it's being moved around. And then also just like keeping it upright so things don't wobble around. How many recorders? Like I said, there's 8 recorders in there. I'm using 7 of them for cameras, ISOs, and program, and there's playback as well in there that'll be dedicated for that. Jeremy says, think you could one day do a video going through maybe specific Companion modules and just explaining what each setting can do. I could do that, maybe as a live stream. I do find live streams easier to get through. I know it's probably not as great from an SEO point of view on the other end because they're kind of long format and no one has time to like sit through and get to the relevant stuff. But from my point of view, it's challenging to have the time to edit something together. So that's where, like tonight, I was like, I got to get this, I got to show you guys this rack because it's really cool. There's a ton of stuff going on, and I want to make sure that you get to see that. before it sort of ships off, and then I don't have access to sort of showing you what it looks like on the back end. But definitely, maybe that's something I could do as a series if we want to sort of work through that. Where are we? Get this Mac one up. The connections, yeah, basically the ones that I'm using a lot are like ATEM, VLC, H2R, Vicrio to control slides, P2Z things, a little bit of OBS, Notion timestamp. Google Sheets I haven't found to be working very well, but I feel like it has promise. Hyperdeck, Web Presenter, a ton of TP-Link smart plugs are really great, and I use that to power my studio. And then I'm just getting into the X32 stuff down here and the YouTube one. That's all the things that I'm using there. So there's some of the things that I could speak to, and if you want to see more from Companion in the future. All right, let's say goodbye, and we're just going to wrap up here. My website, davidjoshuaford.com, is where you can go to find out more, and also I have some free profiles on there if you just want to get started with the ATEM and H2R and that kind of stuff. And that is free download on the website. And stick around for upcoming shows, because as I said, all those things are still to come, and we'll get that out in the next couple of weeks. All right, take care. Bye.